Imagine this: one ultimatum, one refusal, and within days the world was sliding toward chaos. A note delivered in silence, answered with fire. Leaders argued in gilded halls while telegrams raced across borders, and soldiers were quietly called back to their barracks. Nobody knew it then, but the first domino of World War I had already tipped. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon, so you never miss our deep dives into the stories that shaped history. On the morning of July 24, 1914, the Austrian envoy handed Russia a note about Serbia. Foreign Minister Sazonov unfolded the paper, his eyes scanning the harsh demands. He slammed it down and snapped. This will set Europe on fire. Austria wanted Serbia to dissolve its nationalist groups, crush political societies, silence its press, and most offensive of allow Austrian officials to conduct investigations on Serbian soil. It wasn't just an ultimatum. It was a humiliation. Any sovereign state that accepted would no longer be truly independent. Sazonov refused. From that moment, the machinery of war began to turn. Within hours, Sazonov summoned generals, naval ministers, and his cabinet. Around a long wooden table, faces grim, they discussed their options. Orders were whispered. Prepare for mobilization. Across Russia, telegraph operators tapped coded instructions. Finance officials rushed to transfer the empire's gold reserves out of Berlin and into Paris, safe from seizure. This time would not be like previous Balkan crises. Russia had blinked before, but not again. The message was clear. If Austria struck Serbia, Russia would fight. That afternoon, Sazonov hosted a tense dinner with ambassadors from Britain and France. The French envoy, without hesitation, promised full support. France had long feared Germany and welcomed any chance to strengthen the alliance with Russia. The British, however, were cautious. Their envoy spoke carefully, offering sympathy but no commitments. Britain had its own troubles, an Irish crisis threatening civil war on its own soil. Yet Sazonov leaned forward, pressing him. Would London stand with Russia and France, or would it stand aside? The envoy dodged. Russia didn't need to wait for the answer. They were already preparing for war. Two Russian leaders. Serbia wasn't just another small ally. It was a symbol, a kindred Slavic nation under threat. Abandoning Serbia meant betraying the idea of Slavic brotherhood, the very ideology Russia had used to rally its people. And it meant losing face on the world stage. As Sazonov put it, if we fail now, Russia will be seen as a fallen state. The stakes were no longer just about Belgrade. They were about Russia's dignity, its power, its identity. In Belgrade. The Serbian envoy carried desperate questions. Our army cannot resist Austria. What advice does Russia give us? Sazonov's public answer was diplomatic. Yield where you must, but never on sovereignty. But in private, his message was firmer. Serbia could count on Russia. The ultimatum's most insulting clauses, Articles 5 and 6, granting Austrian police free rein inside Serbia, must be rejected at all costs. Behind closed doors, Sazonov essentially gave Serbia permission to resist. On July 25th, Tsar Nicholas convened his council. The chamber filled with uniformed generals and stiff-faced ministers. After hours of debate, the decision came: partial mobilization. Over 1 million men would be prepared for war. Young cadets, scarcely finished with their training, were promoted overnight to fill gaps in the officer corps. Martial law was declared in major cities. Orders spread like wildfire. Every soldier was to report back to barracks immediately. Across the countryside, families watched as their sons tightened belts, slung rifles, and marched away. The war machine was grinding into motion. Meanwhile, in Belgrade, Serbia crafted its official reply to Austria. It was polite, almost deferential, but carefully worded to protect its sovereignty. Some demands were accepted, but the key ones were flatly rejected. At 6 p.m., Serbia's Prime Minister handed Austria's envoy the reply. The diplomat read it, his face stiffening. Without ceremony, he declared Serbia non-compliant, closed his briefcase, and within the hour crossed the border back into Austria. Diplomacy had collapsed, but strangely, Vienna hesitated. Austria had promised Berlin that rejection of the ultimatum meant immediate war. Yet Prime Minister Berchtold wavered. Chief of Staff Conrad set mobilization for July 28th, leaving a tiny space for one last retreat. But Serbia was already moving. Secret orders sent men to the front. Trains pulled out of stations at midnight, packed with troops. On both sides, the fuse had been lit out across Europe. Attention drifted. In Britain, Parliament was consumed by the Irish crisis. Newspapers declared that Britain should stay out of a Balkan quarrel. Why sacrifice British lives for Serbia? But Foreign Minister Edward Grey saw the storm on the horizon. He summoned Austria's ambassador and warned, rejection of Serbia's reply could ignite all of Europe. He proposed mediation by the great powers, a conference to cool tempers. But the Austrian envoy brushed him off. The clock kept ticking. Even in Germany, Kaiser Wilhelm II seemed uncertain. Reading Serbia's reply, he remarked, "This removes any need for war." For a brief moment, there was hope. If the Kaiser insisted, perhaps Vienna might hold back. But his ministers ignored him, pressing the alliance forward. By July 28th, Austria declared war on Serbia. The Kaiser erupted, furious that Austria had dragged him into a storm. But his anger changed nothing. Within hours, artillery thundered. The first shells were fired into Serbia. Vienna moved slowly, its military unready for a full offensive before Berlin grew restless, suspecting that Austria was using Germany's backing recklessly. In desperation, Wilhelm suggested a compromise. Occupy Belgrade to save face, then withdraw. But Chancellor Bateman, Hollweg, delayed, and by the time the message reached Vienna, the guns were already roaring. London tried one last time to mediate. Petersburg pressed forward. Berlin panicked. Across Europe, telegrams flew faster than armies could march. Messages between Wilhelm and Tsar Nicholas, the famous Wilanecki telegrams, begged for peace. Two cousins, writing in warm tones, pleaded with each other not to let the war begin. But beneath their words, generals were already moving troops to borders. Both men were monarchs. Neither was truly in control. Russia, pushed by Sazonov and reassured by French promises, accelerated mobilization. German intelligence confirmed it. Russian troops massing, frontier guards armed, transport lines activated. The pen was being put down, the sword lifted instead. Then came the final straw. On July 29th, Austro-Hungarian gunboats opened fire on Belgrade. Explosions tore through the city. Civilians fled in panic. Bridges collapsed, and smoke rose over the Danube. The Serbian capital was under siege. The war had begun. Two emperors, Wilhelm and Nicholas, still exchanged telegrams, still searched for a way out. But it was too late. Their generals, their cabinets, their alliances, their war plans all had locked into place. Europe was a prisoner of its own promises and pride. What started with a single ultimatum to a small Balkan state had spiraled into something far larger. Within a week, Germany, France, Russia, and Britain would be pulled into the bloodiest conflict the world had ever seen, and it all began here, with crossed telegrams, failed diplomacy, and leaders who pressed the button only to panic once it was too late. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon, so you won't miss our next episode as we follow how this crisis exploded into a full-scale world war.